Australia may seem an unlikely place to begin a story about a Swiss watchmaking dynasty, but there is a very good reason for making this video. I've noticed that a remarkable amount of interest in this channel and in the history of Montandon watches comes from viewers in Australia, and that led me back to one extraordinary episode in the family's history. In 1880, Melbourne became one of the greatest international showcases of 19th century industry. And among the exhibitors were not one, not two, but three different Montandon watchmaking establishments from Geneva, Locle and Besançon. Two would receive important first-class recognition, and a fourth Montandon was already there, not as an exhibitor, but as a member of the international jury. One of the Montandon watches would then undergo rigorous precision testing at Melbourne and outperform the famous American Waltham Watch Company. This is Montandon Watches Down Under. Welcome to the channel. The Melbourne International Exhibition opened on the 1st of October 1880 and continued into 1881. These international exhibitions were the technological showcases of their age. Paris, London, Vienna, Philadelphia, and now Melbourne. Manufacturers traveled enormous distances to display machinery, scientific instruments, textiles, decorative arts, and the latest industrial technology. Horology naturally occupied an important place. A medal or first-class award from an international exhibition wasn't simply a trophy. It became a commercial credential. Manufacturers displayed these distinctions prominently in advertisements, catalogs, and letterheads for decades afterwards. And Melbourne was particularly important because Australia represented an expanding market for European manufacturers. For the Montandon family, however, Melbourne provides something even more unusual. It allows us to see several completely different branches of 19th century watchmaking together at the same exhibition. The official exhibition records reveal three separate Montandon exhibitors: Henri Montandon of Besançon, Montandon Frères of Locle, and Montandon-Lütz and Company of Geneva, manufacturers of watch balance springs. These weren't simply branches of a single company. They represented different Montandon businesses and different branches of the wider family. But then another Montandon appears in the records, Paul Montandon of Besançon. And Paul wasn't merely there to compete for a medal. He occupied an official position at the exhibition and participated as a juror in the section associated with scientific instruments and metallurgy. Even more remarkably, Paul was the brother of one of these exhibitors, Henri Montandon. So Melbourne gives us this extraordinary constellation, three Montandon establishments exhibiting: Geneva, Locle, Besançon, and a fourth Montandon participating in the international jury. Australian newspapers reporting gives us an unusually detailed picture of Paul Montandon's mission. Paul was the delegate of the Chamber of Commerce of the Doubs region and had been appointed to represent the commercial interests of Besançon and the surrounding region. He had already represented the watchmaking industry of Besançon at the Paris exhibition of 1878. Now, he had traveled halfway around the world, and an Australian journalist interviewed him. What Paul told the Australian public is very fascinating. He described Besançon as the center of an enormous regional watchmaking economy. According to the figures he supplied, the watch and clock industries of the Doubs employed approximately 45,000 to 50,000 workers. Annual production amounted to 1.5 million watch movements and another 500,000 clock movements. In Besançon itself, more than 10,000 people were engaged in watch and clock production. But then Paul made a much more provocative observation. He claimed that approximately 3/4 of the watch and clock movements produced in the district were purchased by Swiss manufacturers. And consequently, he told the Australian reporter many watches being sold in Australia as Swiss watches actually contain movements manufactured in France. The Swiss contribution, he argued, might sometimes consist principally of the gold or silver case surrounding a French mechanism. We should remember that Paul was acting as an advocate for French industry, but his comments reveal something fundamental about 19th century horology. The boundary between French and Swiss watch industries was far less distinct than national labels on a watch might suggest. Movements crossed the frontier, components crossed the frontier, watchmakers crossed the frontier, and the Montandon family itself existed on both sides of it. Paul's brother, Henri Montandon, represented another aspect of the story. Henri exhibited from Besançon, and significantly, the material associated with his presentation included gold and silver chronometers, as well as telemeters. The telemeter is particularly interesting because it takes us beyond the ordinary commercial watch. It uses the measurement of elapsed time to determine distance. Here, we see horology intersecting with scientific and practical measurement. Henri does not appear to have received one of the principal awards at Melbourne, but his exhibition tells us something important. Montandon in Australia represented more than decorative watches. It encompassed chronometry, technical instruments, and precision measurement. The Geneva exhibitor takes us into an entirely different part of a mechanical watch. Montandon-Lütz et Fils specialized in one of the smallest and most important components in precision horology, the balance spring or hairspring. The company manufactured hardened steel balance springs in Geneva and presented itself as the successor to the earlier firm of J.C. Lütz et Fils. And behind this company we find a particularly interesting figure, Louise Montandon-Lütz, widow of Adolphe Montandon. Adolphe belonged to the Montandon orfèvre or goldsmith genealogical branch, a family line already associated with generations of precious metal craftsmanship. Following his death, Louise appears as the head of this important specialist manufacturer. This deserves some attention. Women were extensively involved in Swiss watchmaking. They worked in assembly, finishing, and specialized component production. But 19th century industrial histories frequently leave their contribution in the background. Louise provides us with something rather different. A woman associated with the management of a technically specialized Geneva horological manufacturer, competing successfully at international exhibitions. The firm had already accumulated significant exhibition recognition. At Paris in 1878, Montandon-Lütz received a silver medal. Other awards followed. At Melbourne, the company received a first-class award. The result appears to be published in records in 1882, which can sometimes give the misleading impression the Melbourne exhibition itself occurred that year. It did not. The exhibition was the Melbourne International Exhibition of 1880-1881. This 1882 is the publication date associated with the subsequent record of this award. That distinction is important. And Montandon-Lütz's presence also helps us understand what a 19th century Swiss watch actually was. The manufacturer whose name appeared on the dial wasn't necessarily manufacturing every component. Specialized businesses supplied cases, escapements, balances, springs, jewels, hands, dials, and other components. The hairspring was particularly critical. This tiny spiral controlled the oscillation of the balance. Its material, geometry, and consistency directly affected the ability of the watch to maintain a stable rate. So while the finished watches naturally attract attention in the exhibition showcases, Montandon-Lütz represented something almost invisible, the precision technology inside of them. And then we come to the Montandon house responsible for the most remarkable result of all, Montandon Frères of Locle. By 1880, this was an established Swiss watchmaking house with a history extending deep into the 19th century. Melbourne is especially significant because it would become one of the firm's last major appearances on the International Exhibition stage. And one of its watches wasn't simply placed inside an exhibition cabinet for the jury to admire. It was subjected to something far more demanding, a precision timing competition. The most serious precision watches entered a different world from the normal exhibition exhibits. They were subjected to controlled timing trials associated with the Melbourne Observatory. This distinction matters. A beautifully finished watch could impress an exhibition jury visually, but a chronometer had to demonstrate its performance. And precision watches faced several fundamental problems. Change the position of the watch, and gravity acts differently upon the regulating mechanism. Lay it dial up, turn it dial down, hang it vertically, its rate may change. Temperature creates another challenge. Metal expands and contracts. The hairspring and balance respond to environmental changes. Lubrication can behave differently. A truly exceptional precision watch, therefore, shouldn't merely keep good time under one ideal condition. Its rate should remain remarkably consistent when those conditions change. The Melbourne trials subjected watches to demanding positional and temperature testing over a period of weeks. Their performance was measured mathematically, and among the watches submitted was a gold chronometer made by Montandon-Frères Locle, serial number 21972. The performance of the gold chronometer, serial number 21972, was exceptional. Across the Melbourne testing, the Montandon-Frères watch achieved the maximum number of points for perfection of regulation. Think about what that means. This wasn't principally an award for engraving, it wasn't an award for an elaborate case, and it wasn't simply the opinion of someone looking through an exhibition showcase. It was a recognition arising from the measured performance of the watch as a timekeeper, and the result becomes even more remarkable when we consider who Montandon was competing against. One of the most famous watch manufacturers in the world, Waltham. The American Waltham Watch Company represented the emerging industrial model of watch production. Large-scale manufacturing, machine production, interchangeable components, and formidable international marketing. Waltham had become one of the great symbols of American industrial watchmaking. Yet, Melbourne produced a result that attracted attention back in Europe. On Saturday, the 19th of March, 1881, L'Économiste français reported La montre qui a obtenu maximum de points comme perfection de réglage sur des ateliers de Messieurs Montandon-Frères au Locle. The watch receiving the maximum number of points for perfection of regulation came from the workshops of Messieurs Montandon Frères of Locle, and the newspaper added another irresistible detail. The famous Waltham Watch Company came second. The French journalist couldn't resist a little jab either, referring to Waltham's publicity as characteristically American. Whatever we make of that 19th century Franco-American rivalry, the technical result is the most important part. A gold Montandon Frères chronometer, number 21972, achieved the maximum score, and Waltham finished behind it. When we put everything together, Melbourne becomes much more than another medal in a company chronology. We have Henri Montandon of Besançon exhibiting chronometers and telemeters. His brother Paul representing the commercial interests of Besançon and serving in an official jury role connected with scientific instruments and metallurgy. Louise Montandon-Lütz's Geneva firm representing specialist balance spring manufacturer and receiving first-class recognition. And Montandon Frères Locle, whose precision chronometer achieved the maximum points in the Melbourne timing competition. These aren't for representatives of one single company. They're evidence of something much larger. By 1880, the Montandon name had spread across several different sectors of European horology. Thus, Geneva, Locle, Besançon, Swiss, French, finished watches, chronometers, telemeters, balance springs, scientific instruments. The Melbourne Expo exposes the extraordinary interconnectedness of 19th century watchmaking, and Paul's comments to the Australian press reinforce exactly the same point. The industry didn't operate neatly within national borders. A movement might originate in France, a case might be Swiss, a hairspring might come from a specialist Geneva supplier, and the finished watch might ultimately be sold on the other side of the world in Australia. There is also a certain poignancy to this story. For Montandon Frères of Locle, Melbourne appears to represent the firm's last great international exhibition showing. The watch industry itself was entering a period of enormous transformation. Industrial production was increasing, component manufacturers were consolidating, competition between American mechanized manufacture and the decentralized Swiss system was intensifying. Even the specialist Geneva world, represented by Montandon-Lütz, would eventually be transformed. By the 1890s, balance spring manufacturers were moving towards combinations and cartels that would ultimately reshape the industry. El Montandon-Lütz Fils itself would eventually disappear. But Melbourne captures the older world at an extremely extraordinary moment. So in summation of this video, we have 4 Montandon connections, 3 watchmaking cities, 2 countries, and an exhibition nearly 17,000 kilometers from Switzerland. A woman directing a specialist Geneva balance spring concern, 2 brothers representing Besançon, one as an exhibitor and another in an official international role, and a gold-winning chronometer from Locle, Montandon Frères number 21972, tested for precision at the Melbourne Observatory and awarded the maximum points for perfection of regulation, ahead of Waltham. More than 140 years later, these records allow us to reconstruct a remarkable moment when the Montandon name appeared on one of the world's great industrial stages. And perhaps there's something appropriate about rediscovering this story now, because today some of the strongest interest in the Montandon watchmaking story and some of the strongest support for this channel is once again coming from Australia. So to everyone watching in Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, Perth, Adelaide, and everywhere else down under, this episode is for you. I'm Mike Montandon. Thank you for watching Montandon Watch History, and as always, there are still more forgotten watches and forgotten stories waiting to be rediscovered. I invite you to like, subscribe, share, submit your comments, and please be in touch. Thank you for your interest, and I wish you a very good day. Bye-bye.